Hello and welcome to another video. Today we are practicing backgrounds because I hate myself and I love torture. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the reference for you guys in case you want to follow along. I actually have 3 references for today because this is actually 3 different backgrounds that I'm doing, because I felt like since it is a study session today, I will have to do a little bit more than just one background to feel like I'm getting a little bit of an effective study session going. And also, sorry about the footage. It is a little bit weird. I didn't record the screen recording. This is just the time lapse from Procreate, and I just slowed it down really slow, so it looks kind of like stop motion, but I think it looks cool that way. And so yeah, anyway, getting on to the references today. The way I decided to pick what references I wanted to use for the environments that I wanted to draw was I wanted to pick things that were going to be predominantly what I felt like I was going to be doing if I ever got to the point where I was ready to make my comic. And so this very first one is a drawing of like a red canyon somewhere. I don't know. I think it's like in Utah. No, not Utah. I don't know. I can't remember where I got this reference from. But yeah. So it's just like this red canyon because I wanted to draw like sort of mountainous ranges / a type of canyon, because I felt like part of my comic with Hope and all of those guys was going to take place in hell. And so I was like, well, canyons, like red canyons, that's like kind of hell like, right? So that's what the idea is behind this very first reference that I picked. And the other 2 references I picked, you guys will see it in a second when we get to those parts. I'll talk about those more at that section. And so when it came to this one, I actually think that this one came out the best compared to the other 2, because I felt like this one is like an outdoorsy sort of thing, and the other 2 are indoors. And so since they're like inside, there's actually more perspective, I felt like, when I was doing the other 2. Not to say that this drawing doesn't have perspective, but because I couldn't see like the edges of like a room and a door, I wasn't so focused on getting perspective correct. And so that's why I felt like I struggled a lot more with those 2 than I did with this very first one. And so I felt like maybe if I had stuck with outdoor drawings for all 3 of these, it wouldn't have been as hard as it was for me to do the other 2, because I was like zoned in on doing this one without like really focusing too much on perspective. With the other ones, I was like really honing in on getting the planes right. But I'll talk about those a little bit more when I get to them. But for this one, I was actually having a lot of trouble doing these. Like I said, I don't practice backgrounds, and so I don't really have a mind for backgrounds yet. Hopefully I will develop that as I get better, as I do these studies a little bit more often. But this first one was not that bad. I felt like I was struggling a little bit with the trees. I was like, these trees are coming out so bad. And then I was like, don't think about drawing the trees as trees. Think about them as shapes. I had to stop thinking about things as what they were and just thinking about them in abstract shapes, because you saw that first 3 I drew, I tried to draw it like as much as possible close to the tree. I tried to break it down into shapes, and I was like, this looks like shit. And I feel like that tree does kind of look like shit, but also not that bad. But when I get into like the trees where I'm just like blocking in the shapes, I mean, they don't look like trees, but I feel like it still makes it look pretty okay as a drawing, because the whole point of drawing is supposed to be more of like the representation of trees instead of not just actually trees, you know? And so once I got over the rigidness I was approaching it with, I felt like this drawing went a lot better. And then I just added a bunch of shadows and stuff, and I feel like adding the shadows actually makes it look like I know what I'm doing. And so I was actually happy I added all that stuff in. So this is the finished drawing. Yeah, it was pretty bad, but also not that bad. I kind of had fun doing this one. Now moving on to the second one, I actually feel like this one is the ugliest out of the 3. And so when I chose the reference for this one, which I'm going to go ahead and put up for you guys right here, this is actually a reference. It's a kitchen, because like I said, the comic that I plan on doing with Hope and friends it takes place in a restaurant. And so I felt like they're going to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. The image I have for the restaurant that they work at, though, is more of a fast food restaurant. And so the kitchen, and I don't know if you guys ever worked fast food, but the kitchen does not look like this. This is a very nice kitchen. It's not gonna look like this. So, but I just picked a random reference as quickly as possible, just because I was actually running out of time for this drawing. You guys know how I'm always running late on time. And I changed the background to green because looking at pink on white was actually getting a little bit hard to see. And so I changed it to pink on green because pink and green contrast pretty well. And so this actually helped me look at it a little bit. Sorry if it's like a little bit straining for your eyes. Anyway, when it came to this one, like I said, I was really having trouble with perspective, because I was actually trying to measure the drawing, because I had a reference up of the reference, obviously, of the kitchen up because I needed to look at it to see what it was. I don't know what it looks like off the top of my head. That's what the reference was for, right? And so I was really having trouble getting the perspective. And I was like, every time I draw this like little hallway thing in between like one side of the ovens and the other side of the counter, I'm like, it's too short and then it's too skinny. And I was like, what's going on? And so I tried to measure it with my finger. And then every time I measured, I was like, that's too short. That's too short. And then I drew it and I was like, it's actually not that short. And so you guys, whenever you see that, those artists where they hold up their pencil when they're trying to measure difference when they are like drawing something, that actually works. I tried it and I was like, this actually works. And so if you're like, oh, when they do that in movies, you're like, oh, that's full of shit. Actually try measuring something with your finger and then like using that as your finger also to do it on your paper. It actually worked for me, so that's very funny for me. Anyway, so that helped me a little bit when it came to this reference. But when I was doing the actual objects inside of the background, I was like, oh, these are the wrong size. Like you can see there's like one of these little pot things. What it's not like a pot, it's like a holder for like spoons and shit. One of them, the one next to the, I think those are little tiny cutting boards, like plastic cutting boards. That one's way smaller than the other ones, when really the one further in the distance should be smaller. And so, because of, distance, when things are further away, they look smaller. And so I really fucked it up on that one. That one's way too big. But I was actually getting really frustrated with this one because, like I said, I had trouble figuring out the perspective of it. And so since I was so much trouble figuring out the perspective of it, it was getting me really frustrated. And so I was getting to the point where I actually had to go to work, and so I had to take some time off. I'd be like, I can't work on this anymore, and so I just ended up coloring it. So yeah, this is actually my least favorite of the three. Not because I don't feel like it looks like the reference. I feel like maybe it really doesn't look like the reference too much, but also, I don't know, something about it just feels off. And I think partially it's the coloring, but I don't know. This is the finished piece anyway, if you guys want to look at it, even though I'm not very proud of it, but you can go ahead and look at it. Okay, so moving on to the next one. I actually chose a bedroom scene for this one, so I'm going to head and put up the reference for you guys here. And so the reason why I chose a bedroom, obviously, if I'm going to be drawing the characters, they presumably have a bed. I mean, not everybody has a bed, but it's like a modern story, so the characters are going to have beds, and so they're going to have bedrooms. And so I was like, okay, I did a kitchen, I did a mountain, or a canyon, whatever, let's do a bedroom. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do a bedroom. How hard can it be to do a bedroom? And I feel like I had the most trouble with this one, if I'm being honest, because when it comes to perspective, why I feel like perspective is so hard compared to drawing humans and like anatomy is that if you're drawing a human, if you mess it up, the anatomy, there's some parts that you can get away with, right? Like you can fudge it a little bit. And also when you draw humans anyway, if you get the anatomy 100% correct, sometimes it looks really bad. And so you have to fudge the appearance of that thing anyway. Like, have you ever tried to draw hands? If you guys ever draw hands and you're like, I'm literally copying the reference one for one when I do this drawing of a hand and it looks weird. If you do that with hands, they're going to look weird, right? Just sometimes hands just look weird. And so the human body looks weird sometimes. And so, but when it comes to like objects or whatever, they're on these planes and usually they're like rectangular or whatever, and they follow some sort of form. And so if like when it comes to the objects, they're all lined up on the perspective line. So the bed is all on the same perspective line, and the dresser is on the same perspective line. They're on like the same planes. And so if they're not lining up on the planes, it looks weird. It looks wrong. And that's what I was having trouble with, is getting everything to line up on the planes correctly without having like them be angled weird. I feel like I cannot draw straight lines. Obviously this is digital, and so that actually helped me a lot in drawing straight lines. If I had done this traditionally, I would have fucking gave up ages ago. Thank God for digital art, because even if I'm making comics, it'll probably be digitally anyway. And so I had to cheat a little bit. I mean, some people just don't even draw backgrounds. They just like make them, or they like copy them from like 3D modelers, which I don't have anything against. I don't have any access to 3D modelers. So I wouldn't be able to make them. I mean, I probably could find a 3D modeler. I'm just not really interested in it. I kind of just want to really learn to draw backgrounds. So, like I said, nothing against people who use 3D models. It's just something I'm not interested in. I've tried to use 3D models before for like posing characters and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know how to pose people. This is hard. 3D models are hard, you guys. I feel like it's easier for me to wrap my brain around just drawing it, and so that's why we're doing this here. But it's so goddamn hard to get the lines lined up correctly. Like I said, I've never been good at math, and I've never been good at drawing straight lines, and so I was really struggling with this one. Eventually I got to the point where I was like, you know what, maybe it's just okay and I should just color it. And so I get to the point where it's just okay and then I color it. Like, I don't even get the dresser right. Like, look at that dresser. It looks something like the dresser from the reference, and it makes the room feel empty. And I didn't even draw the tree. I felt like I was going to draw the tree and then I didn't draw the tree. I was like, it's too much for me. This is so hard. So I feel like I've gotten a little bit better. I've started to understand backgrounds and perspective a little bit more than I did before, but that doesn't mean that I like it. So anyway, this is the end of the video. Thank you guys for spending this time with me. I'll go ahead and see you in the next one. Bye.